Alright y'all, welcome back to another video. Today, we are here to talk about UFC Vegas 116, Aljamain Sterling versus Youssef Zalal. And upon looking at this card, I gotta say, it's actually decent. You know, the prelims can certainly be a little bit better, but the main card is a solid overall, and I'm hyped for most of these matchups. But regardless, I'm going to be predicting every single fight on this card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event. So without wasting any more time, let's jump right into the video. Heads, I go with Talita Alencar. Tails, I go with Julia Polastri. It landed on tails. I'm going with Julia Polastri. Alright, now moving on, we got Max Griffin versus Victor Valenzuela. I'm going to go with Victor Valenzuela on this one. Now, I understand that, losing your Contender Series fight just because you had a decent performance doesn't make you a good fighter. But at the same time, though, he fought a guy named Michael Oliveira. And Michael Oliveira, I truly believe, is going to be the next big thing in the UFC welterweight division. So there's no shame in losing to Michael Oliveira. But Max Griffin has looked unbelievably washed over his last couple of fights. Like, he fought Chris Curtis in his last one, and both guys just looked so lethargic and unbelievably slow. So I don't really want to pick Max Griffin to win a fight until I've seen him win a fight, which he hasn't really done over the last couple of years in his UFC career. So until I see Max Griffin win, I'm just not going to pick him, which is why I'm going to pick Victor Valenzuela to piece up Max Griffin over the course of 3 rounds. It's not like Griffin can fall back onto a decent grappling game. Like, the guy got ragdolled by 37-year-old Michael Chiesa. And it's not like Griffin's really known for any knockout power. All right, the only way Griffin's going to win this is if he gets it to the later rounds where he's just peppering Victor Valenzuela. But I don't think Max Griffin's really going to do that. Like, I think eventually, once Victor Valenzuela finds his shots, Max Griffin will either fold or he's just never going to be able to get any sort of momentum going because he's just getting pieced up. So yeah, I'm going to go with Victor Valenzuela. I'm going to say by round 2 or 3 TKO. Now, moving on to Francis Marshall versus Lucas Brennan. I'm going to go with Francis Marshall on this one. I think Francis Marshall is very underrated, and you have to be good at a lot of different things in order to beat him. Like, his last loss to Mayra Santos, and Mayra Santos is a guy that's like fringe top 15 in the featherweight division right now. Francis Marshall arguably beat him. And outside of that, Francis Marshall has looked flawless in nearly every single one of his performances. So I think Francis Marshall is just a little bit too tough for Lucas Brennan, who's making his UFC debut. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think Lucas Brennan has really been tested by elite level competition. Like, I understand that he went 9-0 in Bellator, but he's then kind of stunk it up in the PFL, and even going back into the regional scene, he's losing to guys that are like 4-0 in their MMA career. So I don't really know how good Lucas Brennan is. But on the other hand, though, Francis Marshall has time and time proven again that he's solid. And if, in order to beat him, you actually have to be special in one particular area. And I just don't think Lucas Brennan has that X factor or speciality. So yeah, I'm going to go with Francis Marshall to get the job done. I'm going to say by submission because Francis Marshall has been working on his grappling recently. And if it's not a submission, though, I think at least he'll be able to out-grapple Lucas Brennan over the course of 3 rounds. Alright, now moving on to Jafel Filho versus Cody Durden. I'm going to go with Jafel Filho. I just can't really trust Cody Durden at this point. Like, he has lost way too many times for me to really comfortably pick him to win a fight. And sure, you could say, oh, Cody Durden thrives on the short notice bouts. Like, we all know the story of Cody Durden. Like, he's going to do well in the first round, and then before you know it, he's going to gas out, fatigue, and start making careless errors, and then put himself in a guillotine or a Darce choke as he's going for a takedown. Like, that's typically how a Cody Durden fight plays out. So I think that Jafel Filho, maybe he's not the best submission artist in the flyweight division, but he is certainly good, and he is a certainly dangerous submission artist, which is why I'm going to pick Jafel Filho to get the job done via submission. Unless Cody Durden can keep this fight on the feet and just piece up Jafel Filho, I don't see a path to victory for Cody Durden here. And it's not like Cody Durden's really known for his striking. Like, he'll do it for a round or two, but eventually he'll fall to his bread and butter, which is the wrestling. And although Cody Durden's wrestling is pretty solid, his jiu-jitsu defense isn't exactly the best, which is why I'm going to have to say that Jafel Filho, if he gets taken down, he's going to find a way to submit Cody Durden, maybe with a heel hook, maybe with a guillotine, maybe with like a rear naked choke. I don't exactly know how he's going to submit Cody Durden, but he's going to be able to find the neck or the legs of Cody Durden and submit him in the later rounds. Yeah, so I just kind of promised myself to never pick Mayra Bueno Silva to win a fight after watching her kind of just do nothing against Raquel Pennington in her championship fight. And so far, I've kind of been proven right because she has lost, I think, 4 consecutive fights in a row. And it's at the point where I don't even think Mayra Bueno Silva's a UFC caliber fighter, right? Which is why I have to go with Michelle Montague to get the job done. Now, I don't know how good Michelle Montague is. You know, she did kind of just ragdoll a tin can in her debut. But being able to ragdoll tin cans with relative ease is very rare in the women's bantamweight division. Which is why I do have some high hopes for her. Do I think she's going to be a champion? Hard to say. You know, there are a lot of good fighters that are on the come up in the women's bantamweight division. But at the same time, though, I think that Michelle Montague, she's on a hell of a momentum. And Mayra Bueno Silva is just unbelievably done. Which is why I have to pick Michelle Montague to get the job done. I'm going to say by decision, you know, Mayra Bueno Silva can grapple a little bit, but I think that the strength and technique is going to be way different from Michelle Montague, which is why I'm going to pick her to get the job done pretty easily, at least by 30-27 decision. Yeah, now moving on, we got Sedriques Dumas versus Jackson McVey. Now, I'm going to say this. I don't think either of these guys are all that good, but I just can't pick Sedriques Dumas. Like, I'm sorry. Until Sedriques Dumas can actually prove that he's UFC caliber, I'm just never going to pick him to win a fight. Like, in his last fight with Dante Johnson, that was the sorriest performance that I've ever witnessed. Because he got folded up like an omelet by Dante Johnson, of all people. And when Dante Johnson had him in like a WWE-style headlock, he just immediately tapped and gave up. All right. And even outside of that, though, like, he got packed up by Mikhail Osejchik in the first round and putting up zero resistance. He fought Nursultan Ruziboyev to the second round. If anything, that's a shame on Nursultan Ruziboyev to getting it past the first round and having to win using eye pokes. But I just can't really pick Sedriques Dumas to win a fight because his only win in the UFC is against Dennis Tululin. All right, now Jackson McVey, on the other hand, he hasn't looked great either, but he's at least putting up a fight. You know, when he fought like Zachary Reese, he was actually giving Zachary Reese some trouble. So I found that pretty impressive before he got choked out in the second round. And when he fought Bruno Ferreira on short notice, like, it's Bruno Ferreira. Like, that is forgivable. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go with Jackson McVey. And until Sedriques Dumas can actually put on a solid performance and not just clinch wrestling against the cage against Dennis Tululin, I'm going to have to pick Jackson McVey to get the job done because I don't think Sedriques Dumas should be in the UFC in the year of 2026. Alright, so up next we got Rodolfo Viera versus Eric McConico. I'm going to go with Rodolfo Viera on this one. Like, I understand that he got destroyed by Bo Nickel, and I believe that Rodolfo Viera is going to easily beat Bo Nickel. Oh, how poorly that one aged. That being said, though, I don't think Eric McConico is Bo Nickel. Alright, as much as I trashed Bo Nickel after his performance against RDR, you know, in hindsight, there's levels to this shit. And I don't think Eric McConico is at the same level as Bonico or even Rodolfo Viera. Because outside of getting destroyed by Fluffy Hernandez and Bonico, Rodolfo Viera's overall looked really solid. Like, he has a win over Trayshawn Gore. And in hindsight, that's a great aging win because Trayshawn Gore is coming off a win against Azamat Bakoev. And I think the grappling is going to be the ultimate difference in this fight. Like, the reason why he couldn't really grapple against Bo Nickel is because Bo Nickel is one of the best wrestlers in America, and it's kind of hard to take him down. I don't think Eric McConico has that same level of takedown defense or even wrestling. And I think that Rodolfo Viera actually has the option to grapple in this fight, take him down. And once he takes you down, Rodolfo Viera's jiu-jitsu is actually elite. And he will find ways to either make you tired from just controlling you for 15 minutes or possibly even find the submission. All right, which is why I'm going to go with Rodolfo Viera to get the job done. I'm going to say by round one submission. Yeah, I think that Eric McConico, like, sure, he'll do well on the feet. You know, he can pick apart Rodolfo Viera. But it's not like Rodolfo Viera is like an completely sitting duck. Like, he comfortably outstruck Trayshawn Gore. And unless you have like a big speed advantage over him, I don't think Rodolfo Viera is all that easy to get out on the feet. All right, which is why I'm going to go with Rodolfo Viera to get the job done via round one submission. Ryan Spann's one of those fighters that I never want to pick to win a fight. And real ones know that this is the type of fight that Ryan Spann can throw, because Ryan Spann has a history of being a complete dumbass. That being said, though, surely he can beat Marcus Buchecha, all right? Because Marcus Buchecha is complete trash when it comes to fighting. Like, this guy came in as a 12, 13-time world-class BJJ athlete, and he has not been able to use that BJJ across his 2 fights in the UFC. Now, his first fight against Martin Buday, all right, that's fair. You know, he's making his debut. Martin Buday is actually pretty decent. He's like on a 7-fight win streak. But then he fought Kennedy Nzechukwu, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, surely he can just easily ragdoll Kennedy Nzechukwu if the fight hits the ground, because we've literally seen Walter Walker do it in like 3 seconds. But no, that's not what happened. All right, Marcus Buchecha is completely ineffective at the one thing he's supposed to be good at, which is the ground game. And for that reason, I'm never going to pick Marcus Buchecha to win a fight. Now, Ryan Spann, on the other hand, he might be a dumbass, but he's very talented. And he has the ability to put you out on the feet or on the ground. And I think on the feet, there's just going to be such a big difference. And I think this is an easy KO victory for Ryan Spann in the first round, which is why I have to go with Ryan Spann via round 1 TKO. You know, the vibes are telling me that Montel Jackson can get it done, because I think a lot of people are underrating Montel Jackson. I understand that his performance against Davidson Figueiredo was kind of dog shit, but outside of that, he's been looking pretty solid. You know, he knocked out Damon Blackshear in like 18 seconds, and he does look pretty solid at times. But ultimately, I'm going to have to go with Raoni Barcelos, because unless Montel Jackson can just knock you out in 18 seconds, like, he's kind of proven that his grappling ain't the best. Like, even when he's winning against like guys like Daniel Marcos, where they're just clinch wrestling against the cage for like 3 rounds, nothing really happens there. And in that fight with Davidson Figueiredo that he had a couple months back, like, he was able to defend the submissions, but he just couldn't get back up to the feet. And even when he's on the feet, he's just kind of just staring at you, not really doing much, because he's so worried about the takedown. And I think that Raoni Barcelos has that similar game plan. And considering that he's coming off a lot of momentum, I think he's on like a 3-fight win streak as of right now, I think that Raoni Barcelos can beat Montel Jackson. Now, would I be shocked if Montel Jackson just flatlines Raoni Barcelos in the first or second round? Not necessarily, because I've seen Montel Jackson do it in the past. But I'm basically banking on a round 1 fluke TKO in that situation, all right? Which is why I can't really do that. And I'm ultimately going to have to go with Raoni Barcelos to get the job done via decision, where he's just controlling Montel Jackson over the course of 2 to 3 rounds. Now, moving on, we got Davey Grant versus Adrian Luna Martinetti. Man, this is a tough debut for Adrian Luna Martinetti. All right, for those of you who don't know who Martinetti is, he won one of the greatest fights in Dana White Contender Series history, and the UFC decided to reward him with a very challenging test in Davey Grant right off the bat. But I think he's going to get the job done, right? Because Davey Grant, he has a knack for fraud checking prospects in the bantamweight division. But after that brutal loss to Charles Jourdain in his last fight, I'm not so sure as to whether or not Davey Grant's going to be the same. Now, I understand that Charles Jourdain is very good, but in that fight, Charles Jourdain landed a nasty flying knee up the middle and then submitted him with a guillotine choke. And at the age of 39/40, I'm not sure if Davey Grant can fully recover from that. All right. Now, we all know that Adrian Luna Martinetti, he's got a lot of grit. I mean, he literally showed it in his Dana White's Contender Series fight. And I don't know if Davey Grant's really going to be able to test the deep waters of Adrian Luna Martinetti in this fight. So I'm going to go with Adrian Luna Martinetti to get the job done. This could be a Davey Grant fraud check. If you're picking Davey Grant to win, I'm not going to be opposed to that whatsoever. But I think Adrian Luna Martinetti can get the job done against a 40-year-old version of Davey Grant. And I think he's going to beat Davey Grant via decision. Like, maybe he has a hard time on the feet in the later rounds of the fight. But I think early on he can implement the grappling. And he has a lot more power than Davey Grant on the feet as well. So I think the physical attributes are ultimately what's going to make the biggest difference in this fight. Now, moving on to Rafa Garcia versus Alexander Hernandez. I'm going to go with Alexander Hernandez. I think he's hit his prime at the age of 33. He's been looking pretty solid over his last couple of fights. Whereas Rafa Garcia, yes, he's winning fights here and there, but I don't think he's as good as the UFC hope him to be, right? Just because he's Mexican, he's not going to be the next Brandon Moreno, UFC. I feel like we need to really stress this. Because Rafa Garcia, he got brutally TKO'd by ground and pound strikes by Grant Dawson. And while you could say that Grant Dawson is overall a very solid fighter, I don't think Hernandez is going to have that much trouble against Grant Dawson because he does pack some power in his hands. And Rafa Garcia, outside of that, though, he has not looked exceptional in most of his wins, taking 43-year-old Vince Pichel to a decision, finishing Jared Gordon, which you would consider it impressive had Jared Gordon literally not blow his knee out a day before the fight. So I don't think Rafa Garcia is as good as the UFC want him to be, right? And I think that Rafa Garcia, he's not really been tested by anybody outside of Grant Dawson, and we all know how that fight went because Grant Dawson literally beat him to a pulp. So I'm going to go with Alexander Hernandez to kind of just outstrike Rafa Garcia. Rafa Garcia, he's just a boxer wrestler that can't really do either one exceptionally. All right? Whereas Alexander Hernandez, he has power in his hands. He's quick twitch early on in the fight. And he has the grappling to fall back to if he's getting outstruck on the feet, which I don't think Rafa Garcia is even going to do. Right? I just rate Alexander Hernandez as a much better fighter overall. And he's been fighting much stronger competition and beating them more convincingly, which is why I'm going to go with Alexander Hernandez to get the job done via round 1 or 2 TKO. All right, now moving on, we got Norma Dumont versus Jocelyn Edwards. I'm going to go with Norma Dumont on this one. Now, I understand that Jocelyn Edwards, she's been looking pretty good over the last couple of fights. She's coming off a great win over Nora Cannoli where she brutally slammed TKO'd her in the second round. But at the same time, though, I think that Norma Dumont is a lot better than most of Jocelyn Edwards' opponents. And sure, you could say that, Jocelyn Edwards, she has the grappling. And in Norma Dumont's last fight, Ketlin Viera was able to just kind of smudge Norma Dumont. That being said, though, I also believe that Dumont has a much better advantage on the feet than Jocelyn Edwards, all right? Jocelyn Edwards, she just kind of sticks and moves, but not really throwing anything where it's kind of dangerous. If anything, you're kind of shocked if she's getting a TKO. But Norma Dumont, on the other hand, while she doesn't have great power either in her hands or feet, She is able to just piece you up over the course of 3 rounds. Like, her fight with Irene Aldana was super impressive because Irene Aldana was trying to cut the cage off and try to pressure her. But Norma Dumont does a very good job of fighting on the back foot and kicking at range and just making it a very clean and effortless kickboxing fight. Which is why I'm going to go with Norma Dumont to get the job done. I'm going to say by decision. Norma Dumont doesn't exactly have the greatest finishing potential, but she is pretty solid, and her striking, I think, is a lot faster than Jocelyn Edwards. Now, Jocelyn Edwards, maybe she looks technically good, but I just don't think she's the same caliber fighter when it comes to speed, which is why I'm going to have to pick Norma Dumont to get the job done on the feet via decision. Now, moving on to Aljamain Sterling versus Youssef Zalal for the main event. This is a very interesting one, right? I do see an argument for both sides, but ultimately, I'm going to go with Aljamain Sterling to get the job done. I think that Aljamain Sterling, there's a reason why he's a former champion of the bantamweight division, and I think a lot of people underrate him overall, just because he doesn't exactly have the most entertaining fights, right? Because even though he can be boring at times, he'll just look to take the backpack and control you for 3 rounds, if Aljamain Sterling's put resistance against, he will actually work for it. And I think that this is one of those matchups where Aljamain Sterling will kind of just show levels in the grappling, right? Maybe not submit Youssef Zalal, because Youssef Zalal does have pretty good BJJ overall. But I think that the wrestling's going to be the ultimate difference. I don't see a way for Youssef Zalal to really submit Aljamain Sterling. And you could say, oh, Youssef Zalal has an advantage on the feet. Sure, but I don't think it's to the point where he's going to flatline Aljamain Sterling like what Sean O'Malley did. All right, Youssef Zalal, he can be dynamic, but for the most part, he just kind of sticks and moves, not really throwing anything with a lot of commitment. And against Aljamain Sterling, I don't think that's the best game plan, because Aljamain Sterling will not really have to fear anything outside of a knee up the middle. Right? It's not like a Sean O'Malley right hand down the pipe where he can just snipe you out of range. Youssef Zalal is just going to stick and move, just kind of tippy-tappy shots, and eventually he's going to fatigue and be more open to the takedowns as the fight progresses, right? And especially because it's a 5-round fight, and we've never seen Youssef Zalal in a 5-round fight, I'm more confident that in the later rounds, Aljamain Sterling will be able to pull through, who, although doesn't have the best 5-round cardio, he's very experienced in it at least. All right, which is what I can't say for Youssef Zalal, to be exact. So I'm going to go with Aljamain Sterling to get the job done. I think 49-46 decision, maybe 48-47. Youssef Zalal has chances early on. But if he's going to beat Aljamain Sterling, he's going to have to keep the fight on the feet. He's probably going to have to TKO Aljamain Sterling, which I don't see happening because he rarely does it, if at all. And I don't know how his 5-round cardio is going to hold up, because he's never been in a 5-round fight before. Which is why I'm going to go with Aljamain Sterling to win the fight via decision by out-wrestling Youssef Zalal. And I wouldn't be shocked if he outstrikes Youssef Zalal in moments as well, because Aljamain Sterling, he can make it funky and make it weird for a lot of these fighters. Alright, that's going to be it for this video. If you guys want to see more videos like this, please make sure to like and subscribe so we can monetize this channel. But otherwise, leave any comments down below how you guys feel about UFC Vegas 116. Let me know your picks, as well as any other video suggestions you have for me in the comments. But otherwise, I will see you guys next time. Peace.